An expose on the grooming gangs of Great Britain and the grooming gang of America. A little bit of compare and contrast with government complicity. Grooming gangs? What grooming gangs?
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
No, sir, actually, Mr. President Trump. I was talking about the grooming gangs of Pakistan. But we'll get back to the situation here in the United States in the last 5 minutes of the video. And you say, who are involved disproportionately? No, that's racist. And you're telling me the British police are less than helpful and are not fanatically driven to protect the young women of Great Britain? No, I don't believe it. That's impossible. And get this, folks, here's an even bigger humdinger. You're telling me that a British political party was complicit, at the very least? Then we'll cover the Israeli grooming gangs in America.
You may not know this, but back in 2008, the Home Office sent a circular to all police forces in the country saying, as far as these young girls who are being exploited in towns and cities, we believe that they've made an informed choice about their sexual behavior, and therefore it's not for you police officers to get involved in it.
Years after shelving a potentially explosive story, journalist Andrew Norfolk found his conscience calling him.
As the years went by, I had this very uncomfortable feeling I hadn't done my job.
Demonstrations were sweeping across the country.
I sense a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, justified anger, justified frustration. We are a community that has been let down by our politicians, let down by the leaders of our police forces. There has been a conspiracy of silence by police leaders, Islamic leaders and politicians to facilitate the orchestrated rape for 20 to 30 years of members of our community.
The squeamishness of the liberal establishment, and that includes the media, national politicians, police forces, social services, in actually confronting what was going on, left a void, and into that void marched the EDL. It had become quite personal for me. There was a sense of actually reclaiming this story from the wrong agenda, the far right's agenda, and putting it squarely where it should have been all along.
2:30 in the morning, the next morning, a woman on the other side of Rotherham had picked up the phone and dialed 999 because she'd heard a young girl screaming in the house next door. Police had gone round to the house. They found this 13-year-old girl with another young girl. She was almost completely naked, she was blind drunk, and she was with 7 adult Pakistani men. She was drunk and leery. And South Yorkshire Police arrested the 13-year-old girl for being drunk and disorderly. They took her back to the station, put her in the cells, eventually charged her, and she was convicted. They didn't even question the men.
I have heard it so many times before. I've heard this afternoon just more political point scoring, empty words, an apology for something that up until today they didn't care about. I am extremely grateful to Baroness Casey for daring to put the truth in a report for the first time ever, and I have been on this treadmill for many years now. What is in Baroness Casey's report are things that I actually told her personally. I've met her twice now. I took a group of 10 survivors to meet her, and she has talked about some of those cases in this report, although I haven't been able to read it all yet. Yeah. She has had the courage to write that down, and that is the only reason that this government are announcing this inquiry. And I'm not a party political person, as I say. This is successive governments who have turned a blind eye, who have ignored decades of abuse of very vulnerable children because it was a political hot potato. Child abuse comes in all forms, in the home, in the church, in football. But these predators in the so-called grooming gangs, we're now calling them rape gangs. They are predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. We need to record ethnicity.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's absolutely outrageous that the government Great Britain did that. Now, onto a different type of government cover-up of a grooming gang. This time it's here in the United States. And here are the logs to who visited
Epstein Island, confirmed by multiple sources. Bill Clinton, George Mitchell, Alex Baldwin, Ralph Fiennes, George Hamilton, Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Spacey, Liz Hurley, Laura Hutton, Janice Dixon, Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, Henry Kissinger, which may be one of the most evil men on the world.
He is, yeah.
Joan Rivers, Courtney Love, Mick Jagger, Courtney Guest, Phil Collins, Simon LeBon, Charlie Rose of PBS, Richard Branson, Candace Bushel, Tom Ford, Vera Wang, Nadia Byerlin, Co Stark, and here's some more. Seth Green, James Gunn, Dan Schneider, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Stephen Colbert, Kevin Spacey, Kathy Griffin, Oprah Winfrey, Sean Carter, Beyonce Knowles, Anthony Kiedis, John Legend, Christy Teigen Tyler, Ben Affleck, Stephen Collins, Will Ferrell, Eminem, Jeffrey Jones, Victor Salva, Mark Rector, Charlie Sheen, Tyler Grasham, Madonna, Catherine Hudson, Gwen Stefani, Stefani Germota, James Franco, Will Smith. Oh, has Will Smith been in the news lately? Justin Rowland, John Cusack, Anderson Cooper, Demi Moore, Brian Affleck, Meryl Streep, Wanda Sykes, Chelsea Handler, Michelle Wolf, Pharrell Williams, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Downey Jr.
And then a few weeks later, I was able to get an interview with Ari Ben-Menashe, who was the handler of Robert Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell was Ghislaine Maxwell's father. You know, Jeffrey Epstein's little madame, who's sitting in prison for 20 years.
Back in the Iran-Contra days, he's kind of a famous spy figure in the world. Now, he also is a bit compromised. He works for a bunch of other people. Meeting in Montreal, where he told me on the record that Epstein was a spy for the Israelis. He worked for Israeli military intelligence, the same arm that he was a commander in years earlier when he was working with Maxwell. And he gave me, the exact reason that they said that they were doing it, and that Epstein was sent into America was to stop Clinton. You know, there's a big fear amongst the Israelis that Clinton would become another Carter, a very left-wing, very left-leaning, pro-Palestinian guy, and they did not want him to do that. So they sent Epstein in really as to compromise him, to get close to him, to compromise him through money, and to compromise him through other means. And I would say in some regards, that turned out to be very successful. Epstein became one of Clinton's closest friends in some ways, and also financial advisors in terms of setting up the Clinton Foundation. But that's where you get a lot of the Clinton stuff. You know, I'll just say one quickly thing before I just wrap up this little section. But there's the reason why there are so many Democrats in this list, you know, in the so-called list, is because what Epstein and Ghislaine were doing was they were trying to blackmail Democrats. They were trying to get compromise on the Democrats because they were fearing that the Democrats were going to be too left-leaning. So that's what they needed the dirt on them for. So you don't see a lot of Republicans going down to the island. You don't see a lot of Republicans on this list because that wasn't the target. The target was Democrats. The target was about Clinton, making sure that there wasn't going to be a giant peace deal with the Israelis and the Palestinians. And that's why it looks to everyone from the outside like it's some sort of democratic cabal.
Some of the things that I've been hearing, and maybe you could tell us here, is that it wasn't just the Democrats, but and some Republicans. Well, first of all, let's also remember that Donald Trump was a Democrat at the time. Yeah. He was not a Republican, so it would make sense why he would be on the list. And we know he's on the list. That's 100% that he's been on the flight logs. He's been friends with Epstein. Epstein's been to Mar-a-Lago.
We can also say something else though, because here's the thing: Trump, I don't think ever went to Epstein Island. He was never a victim of the blackmail. For Trump, he was more like a parallel figure to Epstein. They were operating in the very same way, in very similar circles. In fact, the one big tell there that I keep finding so fascinating is for the last 6 years, between 2013 and 2018, They both banked at Deutsche Bank, at the wealthy clients section of Deutsche Bank. Now, there's a reason for that. Deutsche Bank went after people that were rich but couldn't get funding anywhere else because they were a little bit on the dangerous to loan side. And in Trump's case, he'd lost a lot of money and needed these new loans. And in Epstein's case, he had been convicted of this child abuse. So, no bank wanted to deal with him. But somehow Deutsche Bank found a way to accommodate both. Interesting that their financial careers started aligning with Bear Stearns, with Ace Greenberg at Bear Stearns. And they both sort of ended their interactions with each other at the end there with Deutsche Bank.
You just said something crazy because I have a little story with Bear Stearns and Ace Greenberg. Greenberg, yeah, actually Ace Greenberg. That's how I got into Wall Street.
And for the record, I don't believe Trump is on the list. Do you know how I know this? Or how I think I know this? Because they wouldn't have tried doing this to the man. They would have released the leak. They would have released the information proving that Trump is a child molester, forever ruining his chance to ever be president. Why wouldn't they do that before they did something like this? Before they tried to put him in prison for the rest of his life? I do believe Trump is protecting a certain entity and maybe protecting some powerful people he may be beholden to. Either way, it's disgusting corruption, whether it's over in the United Kingdom or whether it's here in the United States. But I'd have to say, the systemic torture, murder, and rape of English girls in Great Britain is one of the most atrocious human crimes in all of history, perpetrated by a government upon their own population.